What's up, family? Thank you for joining us. We are live here on X, YouTube, Twitch, Kick, and Rumble, and also Spotify and Apple Podcasts a little bit later. We just want to thank you for everyone for your support. And man, we've been on this journey for a little bit, and we just felt led to do this podcast today with me and my wife. But before we get into all of that, today's podcast is brought to you by 5 and 7 Tactical Solutions. They are the premier team for tactical services and training for those of you that are passionate about Second Amendment rights, or even just the ability to protect yourself, your loved ones, or even property. 5 and 7 Tactical Solutions LLC may be the guys for you. That's where I got my handgun certifications in the state of Hawaii. They offer guard car services for the state of Hawaii and Arizona. If you're a law enforcement officer and you need to get recertified to work at whatever employer that you have, or if you are a special forces guy and you just came back home and you just want a group of guys to train with, they are definitely the premier team with over 20 years of experience in law enforcement. And I will tell you this, they've been on the news, and you see my podcast. We talked about the founder of 5 and 7 with his daughter almost getting kidnapped at Costco. It's real, guys. So everything that's happening in our world today, it's out there, and it's our right and also privilege to be able to train with people like 5 and 7 Tactical Solutions LLC. So if you want to get some really good training, go to 5 and 7 Tactical Solutions LLC.com. Use my promo code gLO808. They will give you $25 off of any training services or packages that they offer. All right, there we go. Here's what I'll say. Today we're going to talk about marriage. This is an ongoing series that we have, and just something we're very passionate about. They say that 3 out of 5 marriages fail within the first 8 years, but actually the number got a lot smaller. I think it's within 5 years now, and it might even be smaller than that depending on what country you're talking about. So in the United States, it's probably one of the worst in the world, and just in terms of endurance or longevity of what a marriage is, or what it actually should look like. And today we're going to talk about that. We've done 4 of these already. This is part 5. And my beautiful wife, Emily, will join us here in studio in about 49 seconds. Once again, thank you for joining us. We're going to play our intro video. You're watching gLO Sessions Podcast. This is Fight for Your Marriage series, part 5. We'll be back in 49 seconds. Man, we're so blessed. You know, I was just, while the video was playing, and I was watching just some of our guests that we've had over the past couple of years. Just in our intro video, I was watching. We have, I think we have the whole globe covered. My friend Dave in Japan, and then we got Irina. Oh, actually, she's in Canada now. That's right. Anyways, she was in Serbia. That's where she's from, and we've got brother Sid out here in Oregon. Of course, my dad, our resident Hawaiian, even though he's not bloodline Hawaiian, he's born and raised Hawaii. And of course, my wife, of course, we're both Hawaiian. But it's not, and of course, Dr. John out there in, where is he? I think he's in Vancouver. He's somewhere in Vancouver. I forget where he's. Anyways, we're just grateful to be able to do these. We call them historical documents. And that was coined by my great friend Dave in Osaka out there in he was actually in Thailand just recently. He was in the earthquakes, so our heart and prayers go out to obviously him and whoever's out there. There's a lot of people that we've been able to connect with over the years that are actually in I think it's Chiang Mai, I think that's how you say it. So I know there's a different section. So anyways, our hearts and prayers go out to them out there, and we're just blessed to be able to do these historical documents through conversations, and we're believing that when we're old and gray, well, I'm already gray, but when I'm a lot older, our kids will look back, our grandkids, the great grandkids will be like, man, mom was awesome. She was very eloquent and very elegant in her speech. Dad, I don't know. He was honest, but I think sometimes he might have, ran through the china shop a little bit too fast. But are you ready to come up on cam?
Yeah.
All right. So if you haven't met my wife, guys, this is my wife, Emily. We are just blessed to have her obviously with us. And we got big dreams, big goals. But for now, we have small steps, small baby steps. That includes marriage, I think. Yeah. So as I was telling you earlier, Han, before we went live, just social media, it's in our face, right? And you told me before I went to go change the tires, you said, well, if you want to hurry up, don't look at your phone, right?
Yeah.
So obviously I looked at my phone, but I'm glad I did, because I got a glimpse of some things that God put in my heart today. And that's talking about this, right? This whole journey of marriage. And I think we are going to talk about the foundations of marriage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into the meat and potatoes, we got to tell everybody hi. So to all my friends in Japan, konnichiwa, or ohayo gozaimasu. To my friends in the Philippines, mabuhay. I'll give you a couple. Let me do one more. To my friends in Russia, privyet. And then to our friends in Turkey, marhaba. And then, of course, you can do all of Polynesia, honey. That's yours.
In Hawaii, we say aloha. In Maori, we say kia ora. In Tongan, it's malo elele. What else? In Fijian, it's bula vinaka.
And if you Samoan,
talofa.
Talofa lava. And as we also have fafitai, which is thank you. I think it's fafitai, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So, foundation of marriage. I think we talked a little bit, or I did, about foundations. We talked about the ocean. We did talk about that, yeah? I can't remember what, but that wasn't a marriage series. It was about something else. I forgot. We've done quite a few. But when we talk about foundation in the marriage, obviously, it's all about Jesus, right? First and foremost.
Right.
Where's my notes at? For us, anyway. And that famous scripture, right? The guy who built his house on the, what was it?
Oh, yeah.
The sand?
The sand.
That hits us close to home, because that's us.
We were talking about that. But, when we were talking about foundations, because this is what I was studying this week, it just reminded me of my dad. And I just recently had a conversation just the other day, and I was talking about my dad. And my dad was in construction. Well, my dad's family. My grandpa was in construction. And so I grew up in Ever Beach, right? Old Town. And between Ever Beach and Ever, it was all sugarcane fields. So, and that was before. Now it's not sugarcane fields, it's all full with houses. But as I was in high school, they started to build out. They built Sunterra first, and then what is that other place? They built Sunterra, then they built the one across from it, and then they built Soda Creek. And I think they built Sunterra and then I think Westlock first. And then they built Soda Creek, but they built the one on the right hand side. I forget what it was called. But we would drive past that. It took them a while to build Sunterra, but it didn't take them that long to build the other side. And so every time we would drive past it, it would kind of annoy my dad. It would annoy my dad. And my mom was talking about, maybe we should, look into buying a place over there because, the houses over there were cheap or whatever. And my dad said no. And my mom's like, why? And, they were having this conversation in the car, right?
Well, how come he said no? Why did he say no?
Because they were building on it, right? Oh. So if you look at it, the foundation was, they didn't build the foundation straight. They built the foundation a little bit up. Yeah, so it wasn't on the ground, it was built a little bit up. But the thing with my dad, he said they're building it too fast. And he said watch. And every time we drive past that place, he said they're building it too fast. They're building it too fast. So one day they were having this conversation, and he was saying they didn't give it enough time for the ground to settle.
Right.
And he said the houses are going to start sinking. And sure enough, the houses used to be on top where you could see, where you could see out. One of my cousins actually lived there for a little bit, but the houses are now lower than the road of where it should be. But in building a foundation, you excavate, right? Because you want to know, first of all, what's under it, but also you want to build a flat surface, right? And so they built up, but didn't allow the ground to settle, because when the ground settle, then it becomes where there's no air, I guess, in between. And then you can see, where you got to fill in or whatever, and then build again, and then let the ground settle. Well, they didn't allow the ground to settle, and they built the foundation on top of it, and they did it quickly to where it looked like it was a little bit above the ground. So if this was the ground, it was above the ground. And as they built the foundation over several years, it became where their foundation was now sinking, and now where it should have been on flat land, it became under.
So this is Eva, right?
Mhm.
Because I know I'm not from Oahu, but if I say Eva, that's not the same as like Eva Beach, and right? So there's different sections, right?
Mhm.
And they're different. Because I know Eva, like Kapolei, is it Kapolei?
Kapolei.
I know the Honolulu airport, for example, a lot of that is coral reef, and I believe Eva is one of those sections where a lot of it was.
Oh, it was all coral reef, because we used to go in there. We used to go where all those houses are now. That used to be our playground. We used to go in there and we used to play, and they used to actually, there was an airstrip out there too.
Yeah.
It was an old military airstrip, but we find bunkers here and there, because
You see all the old coral on the ground, the white coral. Yeah.
Used to have ice ponds over there. We used to go looking for the ice ponds.
For people that don't know what coral is like, best way to describe it for people that have never played with dead coral, it's kind of like pumice, a very brittle pumice.
Yeah, you could take it and make it chalk on the ground.
Yeah.
That's what we used to do. We used to take it and use it to draw our lines when we was,
what do you call that?
Playing dodgeball and
the skip. What is that skip?
Hopscotch.
Yeah, hopscotch. I never played that. I wasn't. I felt like that was a feminine thing. I grew up in the 80s, so if you play hopscotch, you was probably one of those guys that we thought were feminine,
And the boys that played hopscotch was only there for make trouble. Wasn't there to like really play hopscotch.
Well, now that we're older and smarter, like if I was a guy that was, really into girls, I would play hopscotch, because it's like one of my friends, he's I don't know if you remember, what was his name? Oh my gosh. The British guy, anyway, the cook. He was a chef for Angus. He said, "Yeah, I took home ec. All my friends were making fun of me, but I got all the girls, So, yeah. Anyway, so the coral, so coral is very brittle, right? So no matter how much you pound it down, if you don't get it all, at some point there's going to be, I would imagine, pockets of it underneath.
But in certain places, I know that obviously you want to excavate because you want to know what's
or at least what do they call that when they dig for wells? They dig and they take core samples. Yeah, that's what they're supposed to do, right?
Because you want to make sure that the foundation that you're building is solidified, right?
Yeah.
And also you want to make sure that you're building the right foundation, right? Because we're talking about foundation. So even in the foundation in marriage, and this is one of the conversations that I was having, was that when you come into a marriage, you got my side and then you got your side, right?
Yeah.
My purview, your purview, right? What I think a marriage should look like, what marriage actually looked like for my parents, and the same for you, right? So when we come into our marriage, we're already carrying something. And if our marriage is not built on Christ, then It's a different perspective altogether. Like, so for us, our marriage is already built on Christ because of the way I think you was having, I think your last podcast that you did, you kind of talked about um how I didn't want a relationship
Mm-hmm.
when I came into relationship with you, and the same for you when we got together. And I think both of us, as we were in the relationship, we were still cautious at the same time and still getting to know each other, which was very different for me because
Well, tell everybody what we both said to God.
I don't know, I don't want a relationship, Lord. It's just you. Just you, Lord. I'm done. I'm done with stupidity. I'm done with
Here,
toxicity.
I'll be honest with you. I said that, and I really believed and I wanted that, but I know deep down inside I didn't want to be lonely.
But
Not
I still wanted to be married. I
yeah,
just wasn't in that place where, um,
because it's hard. That time of our
yeah.
life was hard. In two different sides of the coin. I was the one probably delivering whatever it was, and to all the ladies that, if they see this, I'm like, I don't have to say it, but well, maybe I don't know if I should, but I don't know. It's weird. I'll just say this: if I hurt anybody, female or male, guys or girls, I just want to say I'm sorry publicly. I was just a young boy, It's like it wasn't my intention. But to the men, man, don't be so selfish, right? To where you want to experience relationships without really having a clear plan or a vision of what God designed for you. Because even though I was quote unquote Christian, like I could have done with a lot of those relationships that I thought mattered. I'm not saying I ruined anybody's life. I don't know, but it's it's
Just
it's
kidding.
possible, right? It's potentially
Yeah.
you can ruin somebody's life by not being serious enough to say, God, I want the best of what you got. Whatever it is you have from the Lord, I just trust you. If we don't lead in with that, I don't know. I think that's a very
I think I've always had intentions. Even at a young age, I always said to myself that if I ever got married,
it would look like me.
would be one Chinese guy. No, I'm just kidding.
Hawaii, sexy Hawaiian, Chinese, Filipino. Ooh, and deep voice.
I not well. I did have intentions, and my intentions was I had a standard of what I wanted my marriage to look like, and one of the things that I did know 100% is I didn't want to do toxic. I didn't want the yelling, the screaming, the things that I would see all the time. So I would frame things in that manner, right? Of I wanted honor and respect at the same time, right? If you're not going to honor me, then why are we even together? It's like I had this standard of what care should um actually look like, so I didn't have to be in this place of self-preservation. Like, I shouldn't have to be in a relationship where I want to get married and then get married, and I shouldn't have to live in a space where, oh, now self-preservation, now I got to put up all these walls to make sure that I'm not getting hurt, to make sure that I don't have to fight you off. You know what I mean? Like, I'm I just knew that even some of the I just knew one thing that I did know is that I wasn't going to marry somebody from the place that I came from.
Good thing I'm from the big island. The number one island. Get the volcano happening right now.
And nothing to speak against, anybody that comes from Ever Beach. It's just that I wanted something different, like something more, something different than a local mentality. As far as how I saw culture, the way culture was back then, even in,
Speaking of
even in,
culture, I agree. Like, I don't think I could ever I thank God that I didn't marry anybody from KL. I'm not saying KL is a bad place, but I kind of agree with that. But talking about culture, I remember when I came back, and I told you this before, but when I came back, I remember the first week that I came back, and I'm gonna shout out Pastor Chris Ewan, my family, so I'm gonna give him some credit for this story. But I remember driving him around Kailua, and I remember in Kailua, I don't know what, I think at that time Chris was operating out of the Jeffrey Kealoha Kailua days. So, but I remember driving on the bridge, going over to Oniava, and Chris, when, in Hawaii, for people that don't know, in Hawaii, when we do this, that means you acknowledge back. That's our
What's up?
What's up? Yeah. So the guy didn't, right? So, and you know the story, but the guy didn't. And then Chris is like, "What, bro? Like scrap." He rolled on his window. He like, "Turn the car around." I said, "No, not turning. What are you talking about? Not turning the car around. I'm not gonna." And I was very confused, because where I just came from in the South, where we live, was a black and a white neighborhood. Like, you just didn't do that kind of stuff. You didn't like stick your head out the window and tell somebody, let's scrap right now. And then to make it worse, I'm thinking, wait, what are we gonna fight about? what are we gonna fight about?
Because you never tell me hi.
Because you never tell you hi. I'm thinking, I was so confused.
That's...
But the culture of it all, I had to get back into that, right? And it's kind of like in the Bible where it says that Jesus, right? He wasn't welcome in his own hometown. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that's our application for marriage, but it might be. You might not be welcome in your own hometown.
I just feel like I just didn't want to marry somebody from my own hometown. I just feel like that. Like I didn't want to. I don't know why. I just didn't. Even the local mentality. It cracked me up because one day I was watching this video and I called my sister and I told her, "Go watch this video. I like you see him." And it would crack me up because this guy was running away from the cops. He got out of his car. He was in Waimanalo.
Is that the one with the slip barefoot?
Yeah, with the slipper. Yeah. And it cracked me up because he put his slippers on his fingers and he started to run with the slippers. And I was laughing. I was like, oh, that's the kind of stuff that we used to do as a kid. But I feel like, if I married somebody from my hometown, I don't think my mentality would have, I don't say would have gotten better or would have shifted into where I feel like God has purposed me to believe, because I was so comfortable in that place, right? Mm-hmm. Comfortable where I was at. Like, we all knew each other. We all grew up together.
Yeah.
Right. And it was a small town, so you got everybody knows everybody.
I guess it would be weird to marry somebody and everybody knows that person, and be like,
it's not weird, because I mean, it would be weird if, like, my neighbor that I grew up with, like, his sister would fool around with my husband, and then we'll be, then scrapping, and then it would be like a whole big family thing because everybody knows everybody, right? But I don't know. It was just, I feel like it was that way for me. But I feel like if we did not move out of Ever Beach, things wouldn't have changed for us as well. We would have been so comfortable where we were at that, I don't know, I think it would have taken longer for some things to happen. But like I said, if I didn't move out of Ever Beach, I would have not known you, because now where we grew up, right, everything is all on the west side. So what is the point of me going to one beach
on the east side?
On the east side,
unless you like scrap.
Right, exactly.
Unless you can scrap.
Because some of the guys would be like, "Oh, let's go Sandy's. Why you gonna go Sandy's for?" Oh, unless you were boogie boarders or you were surfers, then you go where the surf is, right? But yeah, I mean, but we'd go Haleiwa, Makaha.
I feel like the north and the west side tend to kind of stick together somewhat, but anytime they come to the east side, I don't know. I think it's the east side because there's that haole element to it. I think that
I think local people rather
And,
stick to local people and not
and
deal,
townies
yeah,
too.
and not deal with some of those things. But some of my friends had cars, and we very rarely went to Sandy's, and we only went Sandy's for boogie board. If we went to Townside and we went to what's that place that we jump off by Diamond Head, we go over there sometimes. One of my friends,
Oh, by walls.
yeah, her grandparents used to live up over there, and so we used to go over there just to. But I don't know. For the most part, growing up on the west side, I felt like the beaches were always better on the west side than the other side.
At my age now, I agree. So to put this foundational element, this is what looking back 20 years or 25 years now, I can kind of see where, I don't know, how shall I put this? By me leaving the islands and living on the mainland for a few years, and now that we know each other's, like, well, I think we do, our personalities and things that God blessed you or created you with, your bending, your makeup and mine, I don't think we would ever survive had I not had that time in the mainland. I think as far as the culture aspect of, like, for example, if we had to walk out this chapter in Oregon the way we did just now, without me having that years of experience in the mainland, I don't think we would. Both of us would be struggling, not just one of us, in the culture aspect of it.
Yeah, the culture aspect for me is really hard, and I think only now, I feel like it's a little bit easier for me, but it's been so hard because I'm so ingrained in Hawaiian culture. It's so different, and it's not something, it's not something that I was excited about. It's not something that we prepared for. It's not something that I looked forward to. I just knew that this is something that we needed to do, and so here I am doing it, and now it's like, whoa, what just happened?
That I remember, I don't know if it was before I left. I think it was after, when I came back, after all the heaviness had hit, and then coming back home. I remember you said, I can't remember the word for word, but basically you said, wherever God leads you, you said you'll be, right? I can't remember the words, but you said you'll be by my side no matter what.
Yeah.
And that you love me and you trust me. And I think with that, you trust me. I think that foundational part of a marriage is having that trust. But you could not have had that trust in me had it not been for the Lord in your life. There's no way.
Yeah.
You cannot trust. You cannot trust me if you don't have God in your life. I mean, I can't even trust me sometimes. Right? Yeah. If God is not in your life, you cannot trust me. I cannot trust me.
Getting back to building that foundation, right? Because we were talking about foundations and letting things settle and stuff like that. It's very important to build that foundation together when you're walking things out before you even get married. Like, I want to say this is the only relationship that I've had where we've constantly had conversations, and we always had God conversations, but we always had conversations about different things, like, what we thought in life,
and we still don't have enough. We need to do more, and I agree, right? Because you're always wanting to talk more, even though we did a 2-hour class together, or we're going to do a 2-hour, 3-hour podcast, and then you're still going to want to talk. I'm not saying I don't want to, but I understand that.
I feel like the conversation is important, and how you communicate. Like, we would go out a lot. Yeah. Before we even got married, we would like eat dinner and go to restaurants, and we'd have conversations. I mean, we'd sit in a car and just have conversations, but
we could eat at Genki for $30. Sushi for $30 for 2 people.
We were so extravagant in restaurants until we had kids.
Now it's $100 for us just to eat sushi. Starting $100. If we take our kids, it's like $300 to eat sushi.
But extravagant on anniversary, that is a must. And I say that because you need to celebrate the years that you're together.
Say that one more time. Extravagant on what? Anniversary?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
you
write that
need
down.
to be extravagant on your anniversary because you need to celebrate the victory of every year. I mean, you've walked through one year
I like
to get to the next year, but you have hardships and you have issues and you have drama, and you have all these things. There's little victories in between, but you celebrate the year, right? You celebrate that year and you be extravagant on your anniversary because, hey, you made it. You made it to another year, right? Let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate the victories that we've had. We celebrate the overcoming that we've came through um, with all those issues that we had to deal with, right? Celebrate it well. Let's do that. Valentine's Day is just once a year, and I don't remember the whole thing of Valentine's Day, but Valentine's Day is not a really big deal for us because we celebrate love every single day. It shouldn't be that one time of year that now you can take your spouse out and we're gonna go to a good restaurant or whatever. That should be your anniversary because it's something that you're celebrating.
That's a
Right?
really heavy point because I was trying to do the math. I can't do it on the fly, but I know that as far as kids are concerned, we only have 940 something weekends before they're old enough to.
Mhm.
But then I was trying to figure out the marriage one, but then it's not that hard. Actually, you just do the math. If the average age of a Hawaiian, Hawaii has the highest life expectancy of any state. So 80, it's like 80 years, right? But if we started being together since I was 22, I only have 60 anniversaries with you, or 50, whatever. 60.
75.
Okay, so we'll do the math. Well, so we'll do. I only have 75. Even that. If I miss 70, if I miss anniversary 62, then I've only got 61 more to go. So I like that. It's like make your anniversary extravagant. I agree with that 100%.
Celebrate it well. Remember what we did our first anniversary?
Wait, which anniversary?
Our first anniversary when we got married. We went back to the place that we had our honeymoon, which was
Okay, wait. I know the hotel, but is it a restaurant at the hotel?
no, we
Just the
went
hotel.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Turtle Bay. Yeah, Turtle Bay.
And we
Okay.
celebrated, but
Okay, I just want to
then
make sure I have to remember the restaurant because restaurants come and go.
we didn't even go to the restaurant. We got kahuku shrimp.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Remember, I mean, it's not even about going to a restaurant. It's about the extravagant food that we spent money on, which was really good food. But that first year, I remember, I forget, you were taking pictures and stuff, and I bought a lens and
Oh yeah.
the flash thingy. Um,
480EX, which was Canon. It was a Canon flash. It was a 480EX, I think it's called, and then the 52 by 1. I think 52 135 lens.
and to me,
That was a $500 lens you got.
yeah, it was expensive, but we celebrated 1 year.
And we took a lot of good
Maybe
photos with that camera and the lens.
be extravagant to celebrate
I think we still
those
have that
years.
lens. I think Dad has that lens.
I think Dad had, yeah. I didn't get rid of it.
No, I know what we gave it. I think Dad still has it. Oh.
Interesting, yeah.
Celebrate your anniversaries extravagantly. I'm gonna post that on social media.
But build that foundation, so that there's something that you always can fall back on. Communication is a huge, huge thing, right? Especially in a relationship. Prior to you getting married and when you get married. The thing about marriage is, although we don't think about it spiritually, it is a spiritual thing. When you get married, the lenses come off, or I should say, there's this film that has been over our eyes. Now the film comes off, and now you see the raw part of your spouse.
All the stinky, the flaws, the hair, the weird hair that stick up,
Right? All the issues, the
the attitude, the little quirky attitudes here and there.
you see the defensiveness, you see all these other
So,
things. And if you don't communicate well before you even get married, um, that's an issue.
so this is important, communication, right? We always talk about, well, this is something I wrote it down. Who decides what type of communication? If we base it on love languages.
Both.
Yeah.
It can't be one sided.
Because there are some things like, I don't want to know. I know we're joking. I'm joking, but if you come back with a whole bunch of shopping bags and I'm like, how much was everything? And we can correct me after this, but you would say often, oh, it was on sale. It was like 25% off. So it was and you would say it was this, and it was like, $20. I said, I look at everything. Wait a minute. How much was everything? And then you itemize.
Yeah, because I wanted to tell you how much everything was, and I wanted you to see everything before I tell you how much everything was.
My mind is already at the finish line. I like
hurry up.
I like see what the trophy looks like. How much was the trophy? I don't want to know all the. So there's some things I don't want in details, right? In the area of talking or I just want to know, and for me that's probably selfish, because if you are wanting to show me those things in the area of communication, I should be okay or unselfish enough to say, okay, it's the classic example was putting my cell phone down, right, and just listening.
Well, because what it does is it's showing that you care about the other person, right?
Well,
that you
what
care
is your name?
about what they care about.
Well, and what does your name mean, Emily? What is the Latin Western definition of your name? Studious. We talked about this before. It's not the first time.
I know, but I forgot
But
what my name means.
Okay, so tell me what your name means. You have to know that I know you know.
Industrious worker.
So if you're and you actually have those traits, that means you value the process. Sometimes I don't value the process as much as the ending. And if I don't honor you in a communication and allow you to itemize everything, even in conversation, then that is kind of like a selfish way or dishonor you in communication.
Well, then you don't get to know your wife on that level.
But then on the flip side too, there's some things that I feel like, well, I'm not saying you should, I don't know, that's between you and the Lord. But you know what I'm saying. It depends on what it is. Now, when we talk about finances, obviously which we're going to have our first. For anybody that wants to level up your marriage game, definitely look up Dave Ramsey's, what is it called? Financial Peace University. Yeah, definitely look that up. But in the area of communication, I think that's very important, is understanding how we communicate and how we value the way we communicate. I think that's very important.
Well, and in communication, there shouldn't be boundaries as far as sharing wise, right? Now, I'm not saying there should be boundaries in how you speak to your spouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've never done it, and you don't do it either. We never talk down to each other, or I don't ever call you names, or you don't call me names. My parents never called each other names.
I don't think my parents did either.
Well, I mean, sometimes my mom was for my dad because she's mad, but my dad never called my mom, names. Like
there were boundaries.
Yeah,
on both of our parents.
Right. And so, I think there should be boundaries as far as respect wise goes and calling each other names. That's not, that's childish to me.
Yeah.
You know, we shouldn't be calling each other names. And I'm talking about when you're arguing, you're fighting, and you're saying all kinds of stuff. Not that you calling them honey or whatever, but every derogatory thing out there, right? That tells me that you don't value
Yeah.
me and you don't value our relationship, right? And even if you do, but you have a hard time with the way that you speak, then you need to change the way that you speak. If that's the foundation that was built in you because of the things that you saw, the things that you went through, the things, you know, however marriage was for you, I mean, for your parents or your grandparents or however it went, right? My dad was married to, not my dad, my nana was married to my grandpa, but they got a divorce, right? Um, so my, you know, my dad didn't come from that. I did come from two parent home, right?
Yeah.
And you know that was different. Uh, how they raised, you know, how your parents were raised and how they raise you, that plays a part in it too. And you know, if you're a believer, you are asking the Lord to help you build a solid foundation, right? That's right. Like take out all these things that what I wanted for my marriage, you know, what I wanted for us was I didn't want to have to argue with somebody all the time. I wanted a place to be able to communicate and communicate well. And I should be able to say how I feel and you not get so butt hurt, if I could say it that way,
So
about
to
what I'm sharing. Not because this is how I feel about you, but sometimes it's stuff that I gotta work through.
so the difference between like my parents and your parents in the area of arguing, did your parents argue a lot out in the open?
Yeah, a lot. And it was different because it came with arsenal, if I could say it that way.
Shrapnel and arsenal?
And it wasn't necessarily my dad, because my dad would never, he never hit my mom. You know, it's just, you know, when my mom would get mad and she start with all these things, you know, my dad was always in the position of defending himself. And my dad and my mom, they argued, but my dad wouldn't, you know, he wasn't like that. He wouldn't hit my mom. Um, he would always take a defensive stance, or he'd go in the bathroom and lock himself in in the bathroom just because, you know, he just, I don't want to say like he didn't want to have to deal with it, or he just didn't know how to deal with it. Um and because of those things, like, you know, it's hard for me sometimes to deal with things because, you know, this is what you see growing up. And it's not throwing shade at your parents or your grandparents or how you were raised. Sometimes they just didn't know because they, the people before them didn't know. You know, if my grandparents didn't know because they're, my grandparents' parents didn't know, you know, and it's just a generational pattern that we have to learn to walk through and do things differently. It's not that we're saying that um our parents are evil or, you know, all these different things. They just didn't know how to deal with things and deal with it well. If you didn't have parents like that, now if you had parents like that and you came from a healthy background, that's great. I'm just talking about not coming from a healthy background and now
Mhm.
you're trying to build a foundation, um trying to build a foundation well. Sometimes you got to go and get therapy for that, you know, whether it's you just going to get therapy for yourself or you doing marriage therapy, marriage counseling, you know, those types of things. That really um, can help as well. Yeah.
I think, you know, with, I'll take you off cam. I think with like, you know, with my parents, they argued a lot. They argued, but not really a lot like in front of us. And there were a few times that they did, it was always very real. Like they would argue. I can restructure those moments now as an adult. And I remember there was this one time when my mom and dad were, I think my mom was was kind of running out of the bedroom, headed towards the kitchen. And I can't remember how the suitcase ended up on the ground, but her suitcase ended up on the ground and clothes just fell out everywhere. And me and my brother were looking at what's going on. They're shouting. And we witnessed all of this. And I'm like, wow, this is real. This is crazy. What's going on? And, as a kid, you don't really know what is going on, except you know that they're not happy. And I can't say from my perspective if I took or felt any guilt or felt responsible in any way. I don't think I was like that. I was kind of like, wow, our parents is nuts. They're crazy. I was like, wow, these buggers is crazy. They fighting out in the hallway, and I'm like, and so when we got married, that was one thing I was very, very clear about and adamant. Like, I did not want our kids to see like us fighting, right? I didn't want them to think that. I don't want them to feel any of that stress that I remember carrying as a kid. But see, I never really took responsibility or felt like I was called. It was just stress. It was like, and then I go back and play my video games. And back then we had the Atari, Atari 2600. Showing off my age there, but I think with what our parents had shown to the both of us, that obviously poured into these buckets of what do they call that? Like the cement mix. And I used to work at Paul Mitchell. I've had my fair share of, mixing the concrete and mixing the foundation material, and sometimes it's hard. I remember I had to hold this gun. It's like a high torque, like drill gun of sorts, but it had this huge paddle at the end, and so you gotta step on the bucket. You pour the mix in, and you pour the water, and you gotta mix. And you gotta hold this in. This thing is, if you don't hold it good enough, it's gonna come back around. It's gonna hit you, and it's not great. Some of them are really high power, but I remember having to mix the concrete, and just having to hold it in such a way that when it was finally mixed, I'm like, okay, that's my mix. I made that. So, and another way of mixing of the concrete, there was the wheelbarrow method, where you put everything in a wheelbarrow and you just kind of, it's a different type of mixture, right? Different type of concrete, or how should I put it? A different type of set. I think they call it set. So meaning like, there's some concrete that you mix, it hardens quicker than others. And now here's what I'll say to anybody that's in a relationship, or if you're in marriage, because today obviously we're talking about fight for your marriage. And I'm going to give a real quick shout out. I don't normally do this on a podcast, but to Nicole, a very good friend of ours. She's headed to our homeland in Hawaii. I'm not sure what island she's going to, but we wish you well, safety as well. So, but in the era of the foundation, for anybody that's if you're in a relationship right now, or you're married, and you're trying to figure out how can I best serve my spouse, here's what I'll tell you. It's all in a mix, right? It's all in what you mix and how you cultivate that initial setting of if you will. When I was a kid, my dad bought this tetherball. So when I was, I forget how old I was. My dad bought this metal pole. We put it in our yard, and we dug a hole. And I remember he mixed his concrete, he put the pole in, he poured the concrete in, and I was so excited. I wanted to play this tetherball, and my dad was like, you gotta wait. So I'm like, well, how long we gotta wait? I swear I felt like we had to wait like a week. I don't think it was a week, but at least a couple of days. And so, but I remember what was in the concrete. There was like this gray mixture with cement. You remember tetherball?
Yeah.
You guys, so we had a tetherball. We had a tetherball. What do you call that? The pole in our yard, our front yard. And so Dad put it in the. And so I'm sitting there having to wait for that concrete to set. And then even then, you really shouldn't shake it, because it's still, even though it's hard enough to withstand without the braces, without the whatever forms that you have, you still should let it set a little bit longer. That's why a week. I just remember being so impatient. I just wanted to get on the thing and play. Finally, my dad kind of caved in. I think after the 5th day or so, we put the rope and the ball, and we started playing with it. But in the area of marriage, first part is, if your foundation, if the setting is not correct, if your ingredients are not correct, sometimes we opt in for the quick fix, or sometimes we see something happening and we're like, it'll be okay. And then it sets, and then it sits in there, and then it hardens. Yeah. And it gets harder,
Yeah, I think
like behaviors.
I think sometimes too that you don't notice the behavior until you're in it, and that's why it's so important to communicate, because you got to build the trust there, right?
Yeah.
You have to build the trust so that you can become vulnerable, and it's not hard for a woman to become vulnerable, because we're more emotionally equipped, right? I feel like women don't become vulnerable if they're hardened, or there's a lot of things that had happened prior to being in this relationship, that now you're married to the person that's in front of you, and it's hard to be vulnerable because of those things, right? You have all these walls that are up because either, whatever the case may be, some sort of abuse, whether it's emotionally, physically, mentally, however, toxic relationships have happened in your life, whether you were in a former toxic relationship or the relationships around you were just toxic, and this is now your family DNA, and it's not a normal one for you, right? That's, you only know toxicity because that was the normalcy in your life, and now you're in a relationship where that's not your life, and now you have to work through some of those things, and communicating, having patience, and allowing that person to, open up and, be that sounding board, or be the person that they could trust. I want to say for me, trust was a issue for me, and it's not that I couldn't trust you. Like, I knew that I could trust you, but because of the toxicity that was in my background, it was hard for me to 100% trust you. And it was so strange, because it wasn't that is things change when you get married, right? And you start to notice things more. Like, I started noticing more things, not about you, but about myself. Like, okay, this is not healthy. I start recognizing the unhealthy thing, right? You start recognizing family patterns, generational patterns, also toxic patterns because of the toxic relationships that you were in before, not knowing how to navigate well, and really just asking, or being real with yourself and saying, you know what, I think I need to go and get some therapy.
At what point in our marriage would you say that you felt that, or you seen that? If you can pinpoint it at a specific.
in the beginning of our marriage, that was more of a challenge for me. And that was a conversation that I would always have with the Lord. Lord, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to trust, and I understand that a lot of those things came from generational patterns. A lot of these things came from toxic relationships. And it is sometimes we think that, oh, well, I'm the one who chose this, and I'm the one who chose that. But when you look at the patterns in your life, and we've been watching Psych, right?
Yeah.
We've been watching Psych, which is kind of funny because Gus on Psych,
The black guy.
the black guy, always gets into toxic relationships.
I think he does, yeah.
And
Crazy ones.
right. So, sometimes we think that it's ourselves, but not knowingly, subconsciously, that some of the relationships we get ourselves into is because of the pattern that we're so used to. Okay, I'm used to this, right? And so
Even if it's not healthy.
even if it's not healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with my relationship with you, very different, because number one, I didn't want to have a relationship. Number two, when the Lord said, this is the one, I was like, yeah, nah,
No.
I don't think so. This is not it. And, the interaction wise, when I started coming to your house and just eating dinner or eating with your family, it was very different because I wasn't used to the healthy conversations, or like you and your brother could just hold a conversation. I mean, me and my sister would beef all the time, so it wasn't like we could actually have a healthy conversation. But watching you guys interact and have that conversation, I was thinking, man,
You know what's, even though the house was messy, cluttered, whatever, growing up, we always had a dinner table. No matter where we lived, we always had our dinner table, and that place was sacred. And no matter how, I'm not saying the dinner table's magic, but if you have a dinner table in your marriage to start off with, I forget, we were watching we're talking about the budget. That's the one thing that is non-negotiable. Like,
yeah.
remember that TV show? What's up, TNT? Good to see you. Remember that TV show, or the movie, had the four local girls from Waianae. They were singing in that movie. It was Boys to Men had a song called Mama. Soul Food. So
Yeah, I never watched that movie.
it was a movie about black culture, but it was about Sunday dinner. But it really emphasized that, no, this is where we sit. This is where we eat. I don't care what you got going on. You're going to be here. You're going to sit. And we're going to eat and we're going to talk.
I don't know we had a dinner table. And I remember when we were little, when I was little, and say we were little because the age gap between us is different. So when I was little, we did sit at the dinner table. But I think as I started to get older, because I'm the youngest, right? So my brother's like 6-7 years older than me, right? And then I have my other brothers and sister that are way older than me. But, we were the three youngest that was in the house. But when I guess when I became that age where they could kind of watch me, then we wouldn't sit at the table. We would sit in the living room and watch TV.
I think that when you first met my family, that was one of the things. I think that's crazy. I'm at this age now and analyzing it. The dinner table was the one thing that brought us together, no matter what. Because if mom cooked, you're gonna sit and eat, and especially if mom's taking a lot of time to cook multiple, she would cook multiple dishes. It wasn't just like one pot meal. It was like 10 pots of different dishes.
And the TV went off.
Yeah.
And we sat and
especially if you came over, yeah, we would make sure, hey, let's. Yeah, it's different now, right? In culture where people don't have that. It's like, and even though here we eat together every day, we have at least one meal a day together, always. So
And we always sit and have a conversation. And our kids love that.
like our initial part of our relationship was centered around conversation,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And good to see you, brother Sev.
Aloha, Sev.
Good to see you, Sev. So good to see you, brother, and wish you well. You and your ohana out there in California.
So what do you do if your foundation wasn't set? Because now you're in this, and now you're starting to recognize, and now you wanting to build a solid foundation. What would be something that you would say to those people who are now just learning to build a healthy foundation?
Well,
if I can say it that way.
I'll read it. So I wrote it down in my notes. I want to make sure I read it. I want to read it verbatim in a version. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11. Let's just a verse. I'll do NIV. I think most people are comfortable with NIV. And it just says that, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Christ Jesus. Now, I know in context, this passage is not talking about just, it's not talking about specifically marriages, but it's talking about leadership in the church. But if Christ is our foundation, even as a church or in leadership, he should be the foundation for our marriage. And so to talk about what you said,
Mm-hmm.
that foundation has to be broken. And the crazy thing, when we talk about concrete, I was talking about concrete. There's a funny video. I'm on point, so it's going to be a long point, but I'm on point. Okay, so there's this news. It actually was in Hawaii. Yeah, it was in Hawaii. So the morning show, I forget, the guy with the glasses. Anyways, Cunningham. It was Cunningham. Anyways, he invited a guy who was a kung fu expert, a karate. I will blame it on Japanese karate, and he broke the concrete blocks. So the guy goes, "Kia!" punches the concrete, the thing breaks, and the guy in the news is like, "Wow, that's amazing! So you telling me if I just do this and if I practice?" And he touched it just gently, and the thing broke, and he started laughing. And the guy was embarrassed because it was real concrete. It wasn't fake. It was real concrete. Well, what I found out was concrete, that's why when it sets, they tell you have to let it set for 7 days minimum, and then it'll be. But even then, even though it's rock hard, it's still not ready for what it's going to do 20 years from now. So at the Palm Interstate, we had to build a wall, not retain wall, what do you call that? We had to build a wall, divider wall, but it was also a load-bearing wall. Mm. So we had to bust up whatever
foundational wall,
whatever was there. I had to dig it up, and I had to use this gun. I forget what they call those things, but it's basically like a hammer gun. Mm. And I had to bust up the concrete, and I was saying, wow, man, this thing is, I don't know if I can do this. Oh, he goes, no, you can do it. He says, it's going to take a minute. And he says, if anything, change the bit. So I had to change the bit. So they have the flat bits, which move big pieces, and then they have the sharp, kind of like needle point. And I had to get that needle point and just go all around. And once I got that loosened, I had to come back with the big bit. But it was hard work. And I had to bust up that foundation. And the reason is concrete over time becomes more dense and more solid. Whatever liquid that was in there, moisture-wise, it begins to exit it leaves the, whatever you call it, the concrete. But as it ages, so concrete that is older, 20, 30 years, you can't break that. You have to literally drill a hole and blow it up. But even then, the younger the concrete is, the easier it is to break it up because it's still pliable somewhat. So to answer your question, like, if you're already set in a way, you've got to break it up. You've got to allow God. You've got to allow Jesus to have reign in your life, in your marriage, in your relationship, and give him access to those. And to be more specific, when I was talking about when I mix the concrete, you have to know what's in your foundation before you can't just like blow everything. You can't just blow up a whole marriage and say, look, can you fix it? No, we got to be honest. It can be trust, it can be abuse, it can be pornography, it can be lust, it can be infidelity, or it can be even kids, blended marriages, right? There's a lot of that today where there's blended marriages, and so that in that foundation, those things have to be honestly talked about, right? And trust, Lord, would you please, we're going to talk about this. It's going to be hard, but we want to loosen this up so you can work in it. And I think to answer that question, that's where it starts, is being honest about those things that we can't keep moving forward. Like, we're going to have our very first, what is it called? Budget committee meeting tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm kind of not. Because I know that it's not going to be easy, but we got to have that budget committee meeting. We have to have it.
Yeah.
And I think in a marriage, in the initial stages of any marriage, we've been together 25 years, and we're going to have a tough meeting tomorrow. But we got to have it. But if Jesus is not the center of it, 1 Corinthians, for this won't reference, 1 Corinthians 3, verse 11, that you can't lay any foundation except what Christ has already laid. Right? Let me read it one more time. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. I'll make one more point. I'll have you. We talked about the other day. You were talking about the beaches, the beach houses, North Shore. Remember that?
Yeah, because it's the first time. Well, because I saw it. I'm not sure. I think it was on the news, and then I watched the YouTube video of it where this person like filmed the whole thing. And it was kind of interesting to watch because the house was built on sand. It was in North Shore, and the house was falling into the ocean. Maybe it wasn't on the news, it was just on YouTube. The house was falling into the ocean, and the more the waves came up, the more the sand would disappear. So part of the living room, beautiful house, beautiful house. Part of the living room, the top part was already gone. One of the walls was missing, but the sand was, coming in and out, and it was ready. And then you'd see the whole part of the living room just fall right into the water. It was sad, but it was a beautiful house. But it reminded me of the parable of building your house on a solid foundation versus building your house on the sand, right? That's what the Bible talks about. If you're not building your house on a solid foundation, you're putting it on sand where water comes up, storms come, and it'll wash it away, and there goes your house, right? There's nothing to stand on. There's nothing to grab onto. There's nothing to hold on to, because it's sand and it just keeps slipping away from you. So there goes your house, right?
Right.
It's very interesting, but you can look it up on YouTube if you guys want to watch it.
So I just wanted to look up. So the foundation on a skyscraper, for example, is like 100 meters at least. So what is that? 300 feet? That's just the foundation for a skyscraper. But then the other thing is what you talked about in the beginning about Evo Beach. So what you're talking about, the foundation of that house was solid. Apparently it was, because if the house is falling to the ocean, it's on that foundation of the home. However, that foundation was not on the right soil.
Right.
And what your dad was talking about all those years ago, they were building homes on the coral reef. At some point it would shift. Right. So there has to be an honest look at our life, each other. What areas in my life have I not fully submitted to the Lord? Right? Did I submit everything? Because if not, that's going to be a point where it's going to sink. It can be I wake up with an attitude. I can be short and snappy. You can tell when I'm not into my word. Right? You can tell. And I think any man of God, if you are short and you just don't have patience, I can almost pinpoint. I'm pretty sure that they're not getting to the word. They're not praying or spending time with the Lord. and it's very important.
I was studying this out the other day, and I just was asking the Lord, "Hey, what do you want me to, kind of study on?" And I heard foundation. I was like, "Huh, okay, well that's interesting." And so I was searching through scripture, and one of the scripture that I was reading through, and it says it was Psalm 11, and it started at verse 3, and it says, "When the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do?" And so I just sat there and I thought about it, and I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. I was like, what does that even mean? When the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? And then it just made me think of building foundations that we already have. And here's the Lord coming to destroy the foundations that we have. What can the righteous do? Right. And so a lot of times when we go through trials and we have problems and we have issues, we always look at things from a different lens. We always see things in the negative light versus, is the Lord destroying the foundations I have built?
Mm.
Or is the Lord destroying foundations that I've known? Like you talked about having solid concrete foundations that have been built up over 20 years. Well, I've been walking 20 years watching my parents have in their marriage. Right?
Mm.
And here I am now breaking some of the traditions and patterns and maybe toxic ways of doing things, and here's the Lord coming in to destroy the foundation, to rebuild the foundation, because I'm asking the Lord to help me through some of these things, and in the help is destroying the foundation that was built on faulty ground, right? On faulty ways of doing things, not built on Christ, right? But here he is now breaking the foundation so I can build it on Christ, right?
Right.
So in verse 4, it says, "The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord is on his heavenly throne. He observes the sons of men. His eyes examine them." I was like, okay. Well, you've been examining my life, and you've been looking at me and watching some of the things that either it's a generational pattern that I built up. And I'm going to talk about one of these things, right? So in verse 5, it says, "The Lord examines the righteous, but the wicked and those who love violence, his soul hates." So let's talk about the Lord examining the righteous, right? So sometimes it takes long to break up a foundation that has been there for so long, right? Because either it's a mindset that I've had, or a perception that I've had since I was a child, that I didn't think it was important to move past or move on or walk out. So one of the things for me growing up, one of the things was always finances. It was something that my parents always talked about, argued about. Sometimes I would become the focal point of the financial issue because I was sickly, and I've always, I know you always make fun, but I've been sick as a kid, and doctor bills would always add up because I literally spent half of my life as a child in the hospital. Sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 1 month. It just depended on what had happened at that time. And so sometimes the medical bills would pay, not pay, but the medical bills would pile up, and then, arguments and this and that. And then my sister would say stuff to me like, "You see, you're the reason why they're fighting, because of medical and this and that." But, and I understand that my sister was just as young as me, but
Somewhat Dion, yeah.
yeah, I mean, she's older than me, but it would make me feel bad.
Hmm.
You shouldn't feel bad for being sick. But those issues, I feel like, had taken me to a place where um, I think now that we're coming into a place of dealing with things that I couldn't deal with before because I didn't want it um, to be a hard place.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be um, something that was a defining factor of whether or not it would make the marriage great or it would break the marriage, right? And so, as a child, watching all these things unfold, and I think for me, my lenses as being the youngest or being the younger one and watching these things unfold, it was scary for me because it wasn't talked about in a manner that was conversational. It was talked about in a manner where everything was such a high level that it would freak me out. Like sometimes I would hide under the table, sometimes I would, go hide in the closet or find some place to hide because I just don't think that they were in a position to see or to hear themselves even talking because it wasn't, it wasn't even, it was, I want you to hear me. Like that Earl Schoff, what he said,
Yeah.
like, who I am speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say.
Yeah.
And so you keep trying to make this person hear what you say, hear what you say, hear what you say. And the volume just gets louder and louder and louder until the whole neighborhood can hear you.
Yeah.
And being as young as I was, this is now I'm hiding from all these things, right? And not wanting to deal with certain things. Like you would see it happening, right? You can see it happening even in your marriage. You can see it happening, I don't need. No, I think it's gonna self-correct.
It's a lie.
Self-correct. It's gonna self-correct. It's gonna self-correct until it's not self-correcting.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're in a pit even deeper than what you was before, and now it's not even relevant.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant now because you're in it so deep, and it's like, oh my god, what happened, right? But now that you're learning to deal with these things, and the Lord is really the one that has to help us walk some of this stuff out, because you can go to counseling. I've got counseling. You can talk to your parents because you talk. You can talk to your friends. You can talk to your family. And at the end of the day, what can they do to help you? They only can help you so much before even you feel things start to crumble, right? And even though they may say like the best things, they can say the most encouraging things, but really it's the heart posture. It's something that has to happen in your heart in order for things to shift and move, right?
I like that heart posture. That's a good soundbite right there. Heart. I was looking up the Boston Red Sox. Yeah. There was a construction worker who had he put a jersey in. I forget who it was. Let me look it up. I don't want to butcher the story. So a Boston Red Sox fan, Gino, he was a construction worker. He buried a jersey of the New York Yankees in the foundation when they built the new facility. His thinking was, people thought it was funny, right? But really what he was doing is he was, quote unquote, trying to jinx the Boston Red Sox by having a New York Yankees jersey in the foundation. How appropriate is that example when it comes to us, that sometimes the enemy or even us will put something in the foundation of our life or in our marriage, and we'll let it sit there. And like you said, we'll talk about it tomorrow, or I'll just let it go for now, right? It'll heal itself, it'll solve itself. That is one of the biggest lies of the enemy. He doesn't have to have it be up in front and nasty and dirty and stinky, and it can just be just something so subtle. And you're like, you know what? Okay, I'll address it tomorrow. And you think if you don't argue, one of the things that we talk about is when we argue, when you and I argue. I'm not saying this is you, but there are some people that if I don't get engaged, it's not going to be as volatile or hard. I'll just let him go, or and just, you know what, I don't want to get involved. It's just too much stress. But not engaging in that also, that doesn't solve it, right? So in an area of talking about foundational elements in our marriage, there are things that we both know that need to be addressed, talked about, and prayed over, and deliverance in some cases. Right? I'm not saying us, but I'm just saying, like, there are some things that, there are some things we got to pray over, right? And say, Lord, would you deliver us from this? Because this is how we were raised, but we're not blaming mom and dad, but this is how we started our marriage.
Right.
And for anybody that's struggling with, maybe you didn't start off right? Like maybe you've got that jersey in your foundation, right? To encourage the listener or the viewer, man, it's God's grace is so much greater than our biggest faults or sins.
Right.
Right. There's nothing that we could do that could separate us, obviously, from His love, and there's no mountain high enough. There's no valley deep. There's nothing wide enough that will separate us from Him, if we allow Him to have access to our hearts, but also those ugly parts of our hearts and our marriages, right?
Right, because at the end of the day, if you are a believer of Jesus Christ and you know that Jesus died for your sin, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you give that part to Him? I mean, He He died for you, right? And so that's the way that I not just see it, but I think for me, there was a lot of things, and even though, like we talked about trust earlier, I knew I could trust the Lord,
mm-hmm.
and above all things, above everything else, I knew that that I could trust Him because He brought me out of hell. If I could say it that way. My life was not in a great place. I was actually in a pit. And really, when God took my life and changed it, I knew that I could trust Him with everything. And that was very different than trusting you, right? And the Lord had to teach me how to trust in the physical realm. I could trust Him in the spiritual realm because, He's God. He may not be physically seen here, but I can physically feel Him in my heart. And I know that it's Him. That's a big difference, right? And so me being able to lay a lot of things down before Him, it helped me to see things differently, where I could trust, where, not just that. When I would sit down and think about it, like, you didn't give me a reason not to be able to trust you. And so there was this thing in me that was like, okay, but He never gave me a reason to not trust Him, right? So why don't I trust you? That was another issue. It had nothing to do with me not being able to trust you, but something else that was in me that either I needed to let go of because it was a seed that was planted in me, some sort of insecurity from either a past relationship or generational patterns that has caused these issues to come up within my heart, and I got to allow the Lord to transform those things so that I can relinquish that and trust you and be vulnerable on a whole different level, knowing that what I'm sharing with you, and I think this is a big thing for marriages, is can I be vulnerable enough with you that you won't walk away?
I was just going to address that because you say that like this worthy aspect of the marriage. Am I worthy enough that if he found out the real me? I'm the opposite. Like, and I'm just going back. I'm like, am I even the right one? I talked about this before. Am I even the right guy? Can I even become the right person? Not so much if I share everything. Like, can I live up to what I feel like I should be like as a husband? Like, I think one of the reasons why it took me so long to pop the question was I just, without even saying, because one of the ways I move forward is what we said. I'll look at it tomorrow. I'll do the sync tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. That's how I felt even in myself, right? Like, at this age, I look back and I'm like, I don't think I felt like I would be good enough or the right one. I knew, I felt like I knew that this is the one, right? Like, even Bryce is like, remember I tell you, Bryce was like, you idiot. You gonna mess this up. But without even talking about it or addressing it with myself, because that's how I would deal with it, like, I just didn't think that I would be capable of becoming a good husband. But that's the lies of the enemy too, because like, it'd be unfair. And I think I talked about this in the area of, I forget where I was, but talk about the area of cooking, right? There's this weird expectation that culture puts on wives that they have to cook as good as their husband's mom. I don't know where that came from. I don't know.
I've never heard that one.
No. I've never heard it either. But I'm just saying it's like a weird, unspoken expectation, kind of like, and to me, it attributes to like quote unquote mama's boys. But remember, you used to say like, what's that one dish that you made that my mom used to always make? Was it hamburger and corn? No, what was it? Whatever. Oh, it would do corn chowder.
Corn chowder.
She always made it with milk, homemade, straight up, all their ingredients. She would do no canned anything except for corn. Everything else was. And so when you started to make with the cream of mushroom, I'm like, what are you doing? And I shared with a group the other day on this Spaces on Twitter, on X, was it would be unfair for me or any guy to expect their spouse to cook like their mom, first of all, and not even cook like that, but to expect them to come up with flavors that you grew up with. And the beauty of marriage in the beginning to where we are now, I love you, corn chowder. You know what I mean? It's like, I love you, corn chowder. And it's not so much that it tastes better or worse or mom's. It's not even about that. There were seasons in my life from mom until my birth until I met you and we got married. That was what it was up until that season. And then when mom passed, even before that, but we got married and you cooking for, that was our moment of setting our, and this is I'm going to connect the dots, of building a foundational life together in the relationship aspect. From that, we cook together, we eat together. This is our life, and this is how we're going to build upon that. And I think, anyways, going back to the being good enough, it's not so much that if you expose yourself, because I'm in the same, we're both in the same boat. It's just that one's in the front and one's in the back end of it, right? And at some point, we got to come together and say, you know what, we're in this together, and God has blessed us to be on this bond.
I feel like this is where marriages fail, in not just lack of communication, but the ability to trust you with my vulnerability. That if I'm vulnerable before you, will you still think I'm worthy enough to be your wife? Will you still think I'm valuable enough to still be your wife? Would you still feel that I'm worthy enough to still be your husband? That I'm worthy enough of a man to still be yours, right? Looking at vulnerability on both parts. Can I be honest with you enough for you to say to me, okay, well, let's work on this. Let's work on this together. Yeah. And so many times in the culture that we live in, it's selfishness. It's like, no, you did this to me. No, it becomes all about the self. It's all about me, or it's all about, I don't like talk to you anymore. I'll go find somebody else for talk to, because I think the grass is greener on the other side, so let me go jump in there. And then I'm going to jump in that side and find out that, the grass get brown over here too. So what you can do, keep jumping grasses. Right?
Dump the grasses, brother.
Jump in the other yard so I can, get the green grass over there. That's not how it works. When you learn to grow together, right? When you learn to build that solid foundation together, life is so much more sweeter, is so much better, because you're building with the one, right? You're building with the one that's been with you forever. I mean, if you've been there forever, or however long it took you to get married, but we've been together for 25 years.
It's gonna be 26.
Why would you throw that away? Why would you think that it's better in another field? That's the lie of the enemy. And I'm going to say this. There's a scripture here. I think it was a scripture.
I want to stay there if you find in error separation. Yeah, because that's what prompted me to do this today. Yeah, the whole idea of the separation.
The Bible. Oh, here. I was looking over there. It's over here. And this is the thing that interests me. And this, I was reading this today. And if you look on my Twitter account, it says this. It has our picture, right? What God has brought together, let no man separate. But if you go to Mark, and it starts at Mark chapter 10, verse 3, and Jesus is talking to Pharisees, right? Well, he's talking to the people, because every place that Jesus goes to, he ends up teaching there, right? So every time a crowd would come together, that's what Jesus would do. He would teach them, right? So starting at verse 2, it says, some Pharisees came and tested him, which is Jesus, by asking, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? So Jesus says, what did Moses command you? And then they go on to say, Moses permitted man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away. And here's the kicker. Mark chapter 10, verse 5. Okay. It says, it was because your hearts were hard that Moses wrote you this law. And that's what Jesus replied. And I sat and I thought about this for a minute. And I thought how we can make our hearts so hard, against our spouse. And then we wonder about vulnerability and why it's hard to become vulnerable, because maybe your spouse told you something vulnerable, right? For them. Maybe they told you that, hey, I've been watching pornography and, it's been an addiction and whatever. Or if your spouse has told you that, I didn't mean to, we've been apart for so long, whatever, they ended up cheating. What do you do in that moment? Now, that's a hard place to be. And then you got to rethink some things too, like, do I want this marriage to work? do I sit in this place of hurt and brokenness and just say, you know what, screw you? Right? What do you say in those moments, and how do we get so far away from each other? We've become so hard, right? And then there's a reflection period of, I'm looking at me, but I'm looking at you too.
Yeah.
But the reflection period should be, okay, I'm looking at me, and how did I contribute to where we are at, and while also acknowledging, yeah, this is what happened at the same time. If we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable in those moments and really seek the Lord on this stuff, then we end up hurt all the way around, right? Sometimes they see people grow apart, right? Because they've been apart for such a long time. Whether it's working from away for so long, not having conversations, or military couples. There's a lot of times this happened to military couples because somebody's on deployment and they've been away for a long time, not having interaction or conversation, and all these types of things. How do you bring it back together? And part of that is allowing God to infiltrate where you're at.
Yeah.
And infiltrate that hardness, because this is why people were getting divorced. And this is back then, is because their hearts were hard. And Jesus said, but at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. And it's interesting that was put there in these scriptures in the midst of that.
And the two shall become one. It's a very important part of that scripture. And the two shall be one, become one.
One flesh, right? And the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. It really, what he's saying is, even in the hard times, even if your heart is hard, remember that you're not two, you're one now. You're going to have to work some of this stuff out. So if you look at verse 10, it says, when they were in the house again, the disciples asked Jesus about this. He answered, anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery. So if you look at these scriptures, it's not just holding the man accountable, but it's also holding the wife accountable. So it goes both ways. These scriptures are not meant just for the man, but it's also meant for the wife. And it's so interesting to me where he says, this is why the certificate of divorce was given, because your hearts were hardened. But I want you to remember, from the beginning, God created them male and female, right? And therefore, this is what the husband does. He leaves his father and his mother, and he clings to his wife. He is walking in one in unity. Therefore, what God has put together, let no man separate, right?
So here's a question. What caused them to separate in the first place and not be one anymore? Because you and I are one.
Mm-hmm.
We have one set of finances. We have one
set of kids.
Yeah. And we're not speaking against anybody that has blended families, but so what is the source of that separation, number one? And what in that separation caused the hardening of the hearts? And I think part of the hardening of the hearts is that separation. Once I separate from you, there's an unhealthy vulnerability now that I take upon myself. It's the same concept of the in the African savannah, when a lion hunts, he doesn't go after the whole pack.
Who's after that?
He'll find the ones that are separated, and usually hurt or broken ones, and usually the hardness comes out of hurt, and offense. I think it would start off with offense first. There's a short period in our marriage where I felt like I felt like you didn't respect me, and maybe you did, I don't know. I think even you don't even know if because even we can't even figure it out. Like, did that, was that real? And obviously, no matter what it was all lies. The feeling of offense and being, even though whether it's legitimate or not, they were all lies designed to separate, right? So what I will encourage anybody that's watching or listening is that there's going to be offense in our marriage. There's no doubt about that. But we have to stay as one.
Yep.
Because if there's offense in our marriage, it doesn't just offend me, it offends you too.
Well,
Right.
and there has to be a working through the offense, right? If we're not willing to sit down, talk about it, and work through the offense, then there's a hardening even greater than that, because once the offense happens, right? Once the issues happen, if we're not talking about it, and I refuse to talk to you about it, and we refuse to argue about it and work it out, then I'm allowing the enemy to come in and tell me and dictate to me what I think is happening, what I think it should be.
Yep.
If I'm not allowing the Lord to help me walk through the vulnerability, the issues, right, of it, then I'm allowing the enemy to come in and speak lies to me, and tell me what he thinks, or even not just the enemy, but I'm telling myself what I think it is. And I keep going back to generational patterns. What did you grow up with? What kind of toxicity was there in your life? Was there a healthy standard in your life, or was it a toxic thing that happened in your life? Because toxicity always goes back to the negative, right? It brings back all these things. This is what happened to my parents. This is what happened to me in the other relationship that I had 50 years ago. So it's going to happen again. Because of, when we're in vulnerability, because an offense, because we were hurt, because we were broken, it opens something up within us that can take us down any road that we've been on that is negative. It can take us there.
Can
if
you imagine?
we allow it to.
Can you imagine? Like, I'm walking down the street and someone comes up and punches me in the shoulder, and I'm like, hey man, stop doing that. And then this arm comes over here and rubs the hurt and the pain. But sometimes in our marriages, it's like this guy comes over here, our own fist, and punches my own shoulder, boom. And then this arm is like, what are you doing? And then the arm is like, I don't know what you're talking about. Just walks away. But it can't. I think sometimes in marriage you treat offense like, that's your problem. You got to figure that out. The minute we decide to separate, that's when it becomes a problem. That's your issues, that's your problems. Or like, I don't know why you get so hurt over that. I was just joking. Or I'm fine. It can be addiction, right? That in itself, it's not just one person in a marriage that's deep. It's both of them. That's why when, like the other day, you were like, oh my God. And I saw you, I'm like, what happened? And you didn't say anything. Remember, you didn't say anything. I got so upset. And not like, I guess in the moment it may have felt or seen appeared like I was mad at you for not talking to me, and I probably responded that way. But the truth is, my heart was so connected in a way that I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want, whatever that is, I need to, right? I said, I need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
You gotta tell. You cannot just sit there and go, "Oh my God," and then not say, like, that drives me crazy. But it does drive me crazy. But the heart of the matter is, our hearts are one. So if I see or feel like there's something going on, I need to know. So because we're one.
Right.
And I think the minute that I don't have that, I don't want to use these fancy words, but if I don't have that connection or empathy, whatever people call it, that's a dangerous place to be. Because, and here's what I say, and I want you to respond to this, but there's some, I can't, I don't know the details, but I've been seeing enough broken relationships and marriages on social media lately. And I said before we went live, it didn't break my heart, but it's heavy. I don't like it. I don't like seeing it. And that's why we got to do this today, because to give somebody, like, not just, it's not us giving hope. We're just sharing our hearts, but it's Jesus that's going to give them hope.
Right.
But to go back to that, where is it? John 15:5, it says that Jesus said, I'm the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he and I in him, he it is, I can't even read this right, that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. And I think for our marriage, it's what I said, like, we are one, and Christ has to be the center of our marriage, not a part of it. He's not the one we do our devotions and then we put Jesus away and then we go do our thing. He has to be the center of our marriage. He's got to be.
One of the things that I had to work through was, I think it was after your mom passed away, and we stopped communicating for a little bit. You wasn't allowing yourself to be, I want to say, vulnerable with me, but you would um go to the gym, just kept going to the gym, doing all these things, and here I am, angry, right? And I remember we were going into Walgreens. It was going into Walgreens uh, with the kids, and I think I put Gideon in the what do you call that? In the shopping cart, right? Because he was what, one, and the Lord said to me, uh, "If you don't fight for your marriage, who will?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're not fighting for the thing that you wanted from the beginning, who's going to fight for it? And so then that's when I said, okay, I had a decision to make. Either I was going to fight for my marriage, or I was going to be exactly what I was reading, to allow my heart to be hard and stay hard.
And not realizing I was broken at that time.
Well, it's not just the fact that you was broken. The fact that I was, I guess, selfish enough to say, well, that's his fault. That's his fault.
That's how the enemy gets us, right? It starts with the offense and then the separation.
Well, and here's the other thing. Okay, so what am I going to do now? Either I'm going to take the bait of Satan and become hard.
It's a great book, by the way, by John Bevere. For anyone who wants to know, The Bait of Satan by John Bevere. Good book.
Or I'm going to fight for my marriage. Okay, how am I going to do that? Because obviously talking to him ain't happening right now.
And let me throw this in, to be fair to you, I was not where I should have been with the Lord at that part of my life.
Well, yes, but at the same time, sometimes when things like that happen, we need space. And I don't know how to be, I don't know, because, like I said, I was young when my dad died. I mean, I was 19 when my dad died. So I didn't have somebody else to be alongside me to, like, walk this out with me.
Yeah.
Right? I wasn't married back then. Now, when Ulu died, that was different, right? Because obviously we were married for a long time before my sister passed away. But learning to be vulnerable, like I said, learning to be vulnerable even in those moments. And me learning to understand that sometimes, as married couples, sometimes you have to learn your place. Sometimes you got to allow them to be vulnerable with God before they can be vulnerable with you.
That took a minute.
But even in that, it was, okay, how I'm going to fight for this, right? Because I don't want to be fighting face to face. I want to fight back to back, right? Because that's what we should be doing, is fighting back to back. In a marriage, you shouldn't be fighting with each other. You should be fighting for each other all the time. And not all marriages happen that way, but I'm letting you know now, if you are in this position, that, okay, turn around, face back to back and start fighting for each other. And this is where the Lord was teaching me how to pray for my husband instead of trying to figure things out with my husband. I understood that there was a place of vulnerability because of my dad, right? I understood the brokenness. But instead of pursuing you and constantly nagging you for answers that you probably didn't even know how to answer me, that would have led to more of an argument. I just sought the face of God. And okay, Lord, how do I pray for my husband, right? It's one of my as my helpmate, as me being the helpmate to my husband. How can I help my husband fight on his behalf? Right? Because now I'm not fighting him, but I'm fighting on his behalf. How can I pray for him? How can I, what can I do for him that would strengthen him in this time that he is mourning, right? In this time that he is walking through some of these things. Like, even the other day, well, that was last week. In fact, it was last week, Tuesday, I think it was. I sat there because I didn't know how to answer because I was still in shock. Because my cousin had passed away, but he's younger than me, right? And we grew up together. So it was just like, what? Is this for real? Because I literally thought that it was a prank. I don't know why I thought my cousin was pranking his own brother by saying, because sometimes, they joust online. And I was just in shock in receiving that information. And then I forget what you said. And then I got mad.
Was that the one where I got mad?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I just didn't know how to answer in that moment because it was just a shock to my system. Like, oh my God. Like, life is really fleeting, like, we live in a day and hour that you better know the Lord before you away, right?
To go back to what you're saying about our that time of grieving, like nobody has a manual, like nobody, like it's kind of like, we have family members that went to college, got the degrees. I don't care how many degrees you've got. Nothing can prepare you for life until you actually go out there and experience life and make the choices. That's where you really learn, like having the book knowledge. So nothing prepares you for grief.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care how many times, like it's always a new chapter. Now, some grief, I think it will be more memorable than others, obviously, just because of, it could be like when mom passed, that was the first grief I ever had. I think that's the first real grief I ever experienced on a very deep level. And everybody else, it's not that I didn't grieve them, I did. But
it's different when it's your parent.
When it's your parent, it's a little bit, and so to really put it into context, if I look back in our marriage, like that was a time in our life where I that's one area I will say I could have probably prayed over, right? That Ecclesiastes scripture where it says that there's a time for mourning, weeping, joy, and laughter, and really ask God for clarity. How can I grieve and be healthy in this marriage and still be available? Because when we have differences, the differences should always be back to back, not nose to nose. We shouldn't be arguing nose to nose. And so, when you was talking, I want to share this. I think this is where God wants me to share this part. Is, when we build sandcastles, right? The kids, I mean, we see the waves coming. I remember this one time I was building with the boys, and I said, "Hurry up! The waves coming! The waves coming! Build the walls! Hurry up!" And the waves would come and hit the wall, and Cole had this laugh. Laugh. The walls would be falling apart. And we build it back up again. I say, hurry up, the wave's coming, and we laughing. And finally figured out, can I stop the waves? It's going to come. So how can we? So we did the moat, right? You build the moat, and the wave comes, and it goes in the moat, and it goes all around, and it kind of works. But after a while, the water surrounds the whole thing and starts to. But it worked. It was a solution. And then the third one is, okay, you know what? We'll make a hole in the front, and we'll dig a hole in the middle of the castle, sand castle. So the waves come, and we all laughing. The water goes through the castle, through the hole, and it goes into the center. There's a nice little swimming pool. Yeah. And it just reminded me, God just reminded me that we can't stop the waves. The waves are going to come. At some point, we may not always have the right answers, but we've got to do something.
Yeah.
And we do it together. The beautiful thing about sand castles with our kids is that, number one, is fun. It was funny. Cole always found things funny, you know. But we learned a lot about, just in that short chapter of our lives as parents and with the kids. When you build a sandcastle, the waves come and you can't stop the wave. The waves are going to come. Well, what are you going to do to protect your home? There's some things you're going to allow, right? Because sometimes the waves, not all waves are bad. It could be the wave of the Holy Spirit. Hey, I'm trying to knock on your door, open it up. And I think allowing Holy Spirit and giving him access in the deep places of our hearts, to give him permission to access those areas, even before we do it together.
Yeah.
Because if I don't have a legit relationship with the Lord, what makes me think we're going to have a real one together?
Right.
That's, number one, it's not scriptural. Because, and I'll talk to the men on this one, we are responsible for our spouses, right? Like, God gave you to me. And it's not that I'm better, but it's like all those kids in Hawaii, all those kids riding a bicycle, causing havoc. How many it was? Like 200, 300?
That's what it said.
Nobody goes, oh, these naughty kids. Yeah, of course they said that. But what does everybody say? Where are their parents?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in a marriage. And I'm not saying that the wife is any less responsible, but whenever I see a marriage that is struggling, the first thing I look at is, where is the man? Where is the husband? Where is he? When I see kids that are struggling, first thing I say, where is the dad? Where is he? Where is he in his walk with the Lord? Is he spending time? Is he getting in the Word? Is he worshiping God? Is he doing at the bare minimum, opening your cell phone and reading a scripture? Where is he? Because if we're not doing that at the very beginning, it's that foundation set. It's like the New York Yankees jersey in our foundation. We're moving forward. And then 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4, and it gets harder and harder to break that. You know, we can attribute it to generational, what did you say earlier? Not tendencies, but generational patterns. If that's how dad does it, guess what? That's how the wife is going to do it. The kids are going to do it.
Without even thinking about it, because I heard this analogy online, right? And it was around Thanksgiving. And so they were asking this question. It's like, what do you do? What is your traditions that you do for Thanksgiving? So one of these ladies said, and they said, well, where does that tradition come from? Like, find out where the tradition comes from. So she said, I went home and I thought about what you said. And one of the traditions that we do is that we make turkey, but we always cut off the tail. And so I went to go ask my mom, like, why do we cut off? And she's like, I don't know. I cut it off because my mom cuts it off. So they went and to go ask her grandma. So they went to go ask the grandma. The grandma said, well, I just cut off the tail because it didn't fit in my pan. Right. So you look at that as an analogy for generational patterns. Sometimes we do things out of, because this is what grandma did. So this is what mom does. And I do it because mom did it. And mom did it because grandma did it. And we don't think about where that comes from, or even ask the question like, okay, what part of our history did this come from? Right. So that we can either deal with some of these things. Like history for us as Hawaiians is different than history for those who are American. Like, if you are American and you grew up in America, one of the things that we don't celebrate is 4th of July. We just look at 4th of July as a holiday. Why don't we celebrate it the way the Americans celebrate it? Because we were a kingdom of our own
prior to
the independence that you guys celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not something that we've celebrated it because of the way that our kingdom was set up and our culture was. In the same way, we have culture that we replicate.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to figure out what's in our culture, right? What's in our history. Let's look at it and see where the patterns come from. This will help you with patterns that may be unhealthy behaviors or toxic behaviors, or it may not even be that. It just may not just be the communication, thing. And even in communication, it was hard for me to communicate certain things. So when I would get upset, and this is why I would become quiet when we would argue, because sometimes we would argue and I would get so mad and I would say stuff that was hurtful, and I didn't know how to reword things to where I wouldn't be crass in the way that it would come across out of my mouth, because that's not how I learned. I know how to be sarcastic. Sarcastic used to be my number one language. And just out of that, I just didn't know how to say stuff. I just knew that at certain times I just needed to be quiet. Because number one, I didn't want to say something that comes out of my mouth because I'm going to say words that I can't take back. Mm-hmm. Number two, I wanted to be wise in the things that I said that wouldn't hurt you, but, communicate well. Number three is just didn't know how to communicate well. And I know that you knew how to communicate well. And that was a challenge for me, because when you said, well, just talk, I'm like, well, I don't know what to say, because what I like say is not the thing that I should say or that I should be saying, right? Because I remember saying something to you that it was really hurtful, and I remember it coming out of my mouth, and it was like I was trying to grab it with my hand to hold it and pull it back, but it was already too late.
In all fairness, I don't even know what that is.
That was in the beginning of our marriage. I don't know. I remember that you left the house and you went to your mom's house. And I can't remember. I know we were arguing and had said something, and I knew I shouldn't have said it. But because I was mad, I said it. And we just got married. We wasn't even married that long. Maybe about a year, I think. And we were just learning, we were learning how to be married, basically, right? You're learning how to be married when you first get married.
It's not easy for anybody especially if you lived at home, even past, mm-hmm. college age, whatever. But here's what I'll say, and I heard the kids playing music, so this is a good landing strip to come in on. I will say that anybody that's struggling, here's what I believe the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm praying and believing that the light at the end of the tunnel gets bigger and fatter, right? So when they approach that, is number one, the separation does not, that's a line, that's a fallacy. I'll speak for the men. If you think that separating yourself, now unless it's obviously unhealthy, like unsafe, that's different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just because you argue and fight and you can't agree, that gives you no right or no authority as a husband, scripturally speaking, to leave your wife to fend for herself. I don't care what you're arguing about. I don't care what you're fighting about, unless it's like in a physical situation where there's abuse. That's different. But my point is, as a husband, as a father, you have no, I'm going to look at the camera, you have no right or no authority to leave your spouse. And if you have children, even more so. I even dare to say, how dare we as men think that we can leave a situation just because we can't agree or we are always arguing? We have no authority or right to do that, as so designated by the Lord that is that's our home, that's our kids, our family, our wife. And to slap on an encouragement band-aid to that is that God designed us to be providers and protectors, not to be quitters just because we can't handle the heat in the kitchen. My dad, the greatest advice he gave us, right, was you're going to have disagreements, but talk about it. If you got to argue while you're talking, argue about it, but don't stop talking. Don't quit. You're going to have those. One of the if I have a regret, one of the regrets I have was leaving you and the kids at home so I can go sleep at mom and dad's house because I couldn't handle the heat in the kitchen in our arguments. That probably is a regret. I wish I could go back and just kind of push the reset button, because that is a field day for the enemy to come in and just wreak havoc, not just on you and the kids, but even for me. Because my purpose now is shifted from being a provider and a protector to being an abandoner. That's not a word, abandoner, right? And even though it's just for a day or whatever it was, I don't know how long it was, and it doesn't matter. The point that I did that was wrong. And I would encourage anybody that's, if you're in a, and like, obviously we're praying for you guys, but if you're in a place in a separation like that, here's what I know. God's grace is far greater than our greatest mistakes, disagreements, and that he desires for us men to stand up, be strong, stand firm on the word of God. And like, you know what? Like, we made mistakes, I'm going to stay here. Mm-hmm. If I got to sleep on the sofa, I'll sleep on the sofa. I'm not leaving this house. Because if I leave this house and something were to happen, oh my God, I'm held accountable for that. So I would encourage any man, fight, argue. I mean, don't fight physically, but stay home, right?
Yeah.
Stay home. Sleep on the sofa. If you got to sleep in the garage, at least you're on the property. If it's that bad, but argue and let your kids know that it's not their fault and it's not about them, even if it is about them.
Well, I would even say to that is trust the Lord. I mean, build a solid foundation, build a foundation that matters. And, like I was talking about when we were walking through the season, the Lord was telling me to, if I don't fight for my marriage, who's gonna, right? It's learning to trust him in all those things. And there's a scripture that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but on your ways, acknowledge him and he will direct your path, right? It's asking the Lord, okay, I'm not leaning on my own understanding, and whatever you tell me to do in this moment, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Right. I use wisdom in that, right? Because God's not going to tell you for do something stupid, right? He's not going to tell you for shoot somebody, murder them, stab them, or whatever. That's the enemy talking to you. Okay? That's not the kind of God that we serve, right? But God will show you what to do. And in those moments, the Lord was showing me how to pray for him, what to pray for him, and allow him to work. Because if I try to lean on my own understanding and then come at him and tell him, you need to tell me this, and you need to da 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 da, and he doesn't know how to answer me, right? It's just going to escalate into something further. I needed to wait for him to be able to be vulnerable with God in those moments, allow God to help him in that, while I'm helping him as his helpmate by praying for him. And not praying what I want, but praying that he would surrender those things to the Lord and allow the Lord to help him, right? Not praying what I want. Lord, slap this man so he talk to me. Yeah, no, that's not what the Lord is going to answer. Like that's selfish prayer, right? But really leaning into God and wanting the best for your husband. So in wanting the best for your husband is, Lord, how do I pray for my husband? That it would help the both of us, right? Because now we're one. We're a unit. We're together. We're in unity. And if we're not, then there's chaos, there's hurt, there's pain, and you keep going down a road that you don't want to be on because you just don't want to surrender, and you don't want to be vulnerable, and you don't want to be not selfish, right? You want to be selfish because it's all about me. No, you got to get out of the all about me, because now you two are one and you're working together as one. So you need to be one which means that I'm the helpmate that my mate needs, and how can I help them in the situation that they are in, whether they need to see a doctor. Maybe you guys need to go marriage counseling. I mean, I'm telling you, marriage counseling is where it's at to help you safeguard your marriage and really not just sit there and take it all in, but apply it, right? This is a scripture that I'm going to share over here. It says, Luke 6 from 47 to 49, verse 47 to 49. It says, everyone who comes to me and hear my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, the streams broke against that house and could not shake it because it had been well built. So if we build our house on Christ, right, we built the right foundation. Even if our foundation was wrong, let the Lord rebuild that foundation and teach you how to build the foundation right, because building a solid foundation matters. Mm-hmm. It matters for your marriage to be well, right? It builds durability, stability, integrity overall for the whole foundation, right? Stamina. And it shows the quality of your foundation. Mm-hmm. It shows the quality of your foundation. I mean, we talked about marriage. We talked about us. We talked about some of the places where we began in the beginning, right? We talked about trust issues and generational patterns and all these things. At the end of the day, right, the Lord has always been the center of our marriage. And really, it has always been the Lord who held us together. It has always been the Lord who's held our marriage together. Even when my husband fell off a horse, or if I fell off a cow.
Bull.
Bull. Right? Even when we were stubborn in those places, the Lord really held our marriage together and has always been holding on our marriage together. And if you look at this series, this is one of the last series that we did. We have been doing marriage counseling for marriage conferences for I don't know how many years, and it really has tremendously helped us. The last one we did is called All Things Are Possible.
Victor Marx.
By Victor Marx. And it's a great marriage conference thing that will help you and your spouse get closer together. If you don't know where to begin, Lord, I don't know where to begin. Mm-hmm. Please help me in my foundation. I guarantee you that the Lord Jesus Christ will come and help you in those places. I'm telling you, you will see fruit if you apply. If you apply the word of God to it. You know, God has been so gracious to us in these years that we've been together. He's been good. He's been faithful. He's been merciful, even when we didn't deserve mercy. Mm-hmm. He's been gracious, even when we didn't deserve grace. You know, we've allowed ourselves to be vulnerable before Him. The greatest vulnerability that you could ever have is vulnerability before God. If you can't lay it down before your spouse, lay it down before God and allow Him access to your heart. Allow Him access to shift your heart that's hard, or shift your spouse's heart, your spouse's heart that's hard. Ask Holy Spirit to show you what to do in it. And I promise you, God will help you out.
That's good. You landed it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to close. Okay, you're off cam. Fam, we thank you for spending time with us. And I will tell you, the greatest superpower a man can ever receive from his wife is when she prays for him. Just want to throw that out there. So And if you guys enjoyed today's podcast, first of all, thank you. But do us a favor on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, Podbean, all the other outlets. Do me a favor, give us a review, 5-star, whatever. But just we appreciate the love. Make sure you click the subscribe button if you're on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, or Rumble. That subscribe button would be very helpful. And we just thank you for spending time with us. We do these to edify the body of Christ, but also to speak life into our marriage as well. We need just as much as what we're talking about. And I just want to encourage you guys, and may God bless you. And I'll share a verse in closing, and then I'll just turn it off from here. But may the very God of peace, sanctify you wholly. And I pray that God, your whole spirit and soul and body be preserved blameless unto the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. And until that time comes, however, let's keep building. Keep building one another up in marriage, in relationship. And so that's it. Thank you guys. We really, really appreciate you. We love you guys. Thank you for your time, your hearts, 2 parts, your data, all that good stuff. But most importantly, family, thank you for your time above everything else. And we hope that the exchange of your time for this, that it was worth it. And as we always say, we love you guys. God bless you guys. Ahui ho, aloha, and mahalo. Yes, sir. Chihu.